All right, so this is a speaker meeting. Our speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask that out of respect for the speaker, everyone remain seated until the speaker is finished. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening, Angie.
My name's Angie, and I have alcoholism. Welcome to our visitors, Michael, Mike, Travis, and to everyone that stood up for under 30 days, and to anyone who didn't stand up because they might be too scared to. I want to welcome you guys here. A big reason why I continue to come back to these meetings is because of the newcomer. And, recently I got to watch a woman walk through her fifth step and get free of the bondage of self. And it's amazing to see the light turn on in someone's eyes. And it's like truly the reason why I come back to these meetings, to see, this fellowship grow up about us. I get kind of raw, I get kind of real. I don't get nervous when I share my story anymore, but I prepare for the embarrassment because I start telling stories and then I'll forget what I'm talking about. And I get these blackouts sober and and then I'll just be off in outer space somewhere I have no idea where the story was going and I'll just change the subject. So please forgive me. My story really starts in 2019 when I was surrendered to the second half of the first step. And I don't like sharing this story. I do it for a reason. But the second half of the first step is about the management of our life. And, for me, I was getting sober in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 2019. I had about 3 months of sobriety, and I was suffering untreated alcoholism. And the book describes it on page 52. It says, there's several different things on there, but it talks about, we have no control over our emotional natures. We're not of real usefulness to other people. And there's several other things, but I was really suffering untreated alcoholism. Whenever I get loaded, I end up back at my parents' house because when I am drunk, I stop taking care of my responsibilities, and now I make them your problem. And I was living at my parents' house. I had been sober before. I had been a member of AA. I had reaped the benefits of this program, and the delusion that I could drink like normal people came about me, and I tried drinking again. And so I ended up back at my parents' house. And I remember this particular day, my daughter was about 1 year old, and the voice of my alcoholism told me that the world would be a better place without me. And I couldn't leave my daughter without her father and without a mother, so the voice of my alcoholism told me that I should kill my daughter and kill myself. And there was a gun in my dad's safe in the basement, and I was tearing apart the basement, taking the safe, smashing it against the concrete floor, trying to get the gun out of my dad's safe so I could put a bullet in my daughter's head and put a bullet in my head. And I remember hitting my knees because I couldn't get the gun out of the safe, and a voice that I'd never heard before whispered in my ear and told me to keep going. And I had never heard the voice of God before, but it gives me the chills when I say that, because if there was ever a God that I didn't believe in, I had heard it in that moment. And I got up and I made a phone call the next day to and it's so strange, out of everything I've heard in an AA meeting, the only thing that I heard from this particular person was a story about how they had yelled at their child. And this story I heard 7 years prior to this event. And for whatever reason, on that particular day, the seed had opened up. It had been planted inside of me 7 years ago, but it started to flourish on that day. And I remembered this story of this old-timer guy in a meeting, and he said, I screamed at my kid, and my alcoholism told me to exit parenting, and I was going to walk away and not be a parent anymore, and she's better off without me. And for whatever reason, 7 years later, I called that guy, and he became my sponsor. And he carried a message to me of depth and weight that I really believe saved my life. And prior to this, it was I had been surrendered in that moment from that second half, the self-reliance of this program and the management of my life. And at that time, I was meeting with the sponsor, and she would have me write these lists. What are all the things that you're avoiding doing? And I would write down this list. I can't fucking stand taking a shower right now. Getting out of bed is horrible. Don't want to go to work. I don't want to do all these things that sober people have to do. Like, this life just sucks. And we would meet, and she would read the 12 and 12 to me, and then she'd be like, okay, get up every day and take a shower. And I'm like going home like, oh my God. I'm like, are you joking me? Like, I got to take a shower every day? That's what I got to do for my sobriety? Like, this is a joke. Like, I'm going to kill myself. And, like right before this, it was like I had been to detox 3 times. I couldn't stay sober. And when I sat in that third detox, I went to this particular detox because my plan was that they were going to give me the good meds. Like this, I went to this particular place in Milwaukee because they had those good meds. Like you didn't feel a thing when you detoxed. And when I got there, they didn't give me any of those meds. And I sat in that room for 3 days with the discomfort of my detox, for the first time, taking responsibility that it wasn't these doctors' fault why I was in detox. It was because I can't stop putting copious amounts of alcohol in my body, and like my body is now rejecting what my mind is obsessed with. I'm like throwing up white stuff, and it's stomach bile because like I can't metabolize alcohol anymore. And I remember these tears streaming down my face, and for the first time in my life, I didn't pray for anything selfish. I asked God what God's plan was for me. I prayed to a God that I didn't believe in, what God's plan was for me. The next day I got a phone call on those little really cool payphones that you get there. And, I picked up the phone. It was a woman that I knew from a long time ago, and she goes, we're going to scholarship you into this program. It was called Nova Counseling Centers in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's a wonderful 30-day program that has like a lot of spiritual energy there, really good recovery. And I went to, she said on the phone, if you're ready and willing, well, you can come here when you're done at detox. And the voice in my head said, I'm not going. And on the phone I said, okay. And I went to that 30-day program, and I remember just this gut-wrenching feeling like I can't leave my child behind. Like I can't be without my child. But I knew in my heart that my daughter was safer without me. And so I went to this 30-day program and did what I always do. I got a rehab romance. Sorry. I've been to treatment 15 times, and I probably have a dozen rehab boyfriends. And so, I went there, and I was willing to do sobriety, and got caught up in him, and he was great. He played football, and just the look of his skin when he was detoxing, playing football outside was incredible. So me and him really hit it off. He didn't know anything about Milwaukee, but he sure followed me there after that 30-day program, and we had a great time. And and this is the thing, you guys. Like this guy was obsessed with me for one reason and one reason only. And I know what you guys are thinking. It's because I'm calm, mature, responsible. No, it's because I put out at the treatment center. That's the only reason why this guy was interested in me. I'm sorry, ladies, if you're in treatment and some dude's obsessed with you, it's because you put out. That's the only reason. And I'm just going to say it, That's why I don't have guys obsessed with me anymore, because I don't put out anymore. All right, sorry. Jokes aside, so that's what I was doing before this surrender, right? I'm in treatment, and I'm getting the power from this dude, right? And I'm not meeting my problem because I'm getting the power from him. And I've done this before several times. This is not my first rodeo. I've been to 15 treatment centers and probably over 24 detoxes in my lifetime. And it's like, at some point, 2 months after that program, I was meeting my real problem, which was my self-reliance. There's a voice in my head, I call it alcoholism. It's been telling me what to do since I was a little girl. Every time the voice told me to steal, I would steal. Every time the voice told me to sleep with some guy at treatment, I would sleep with some guy at treatment. If it told me to steal, I was going to steal. I would avoid, I would blame, I would do all these things. And my life was never my fault. It was always somebody else's fault. And I was starting to grasp the idea that my life was always in shambles because somebody that continued to manage it, and it wasn't anybody but me. It says in the third step that the root of our troubles is a deep-seated selfishness and self-centeredness. And I discovered that I am all that I think about. I remember calling my sponsor and complaining about, I can't believe my daughter's in this situation again. You don't understand. We're back at my parents' house. My parents are abusive and they're angry and all the things. And I remember my sponsor telling me the truth, man. And I needed to hear the truth. They were like, you don't care about your daughter. You only care about how it affects you. I needed to hear that. Because what I was really suffering from was I was obsessed with myself. In the third step, it says, and I heard this once before, and I think that it's pretty accurate. It's you could be in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for 7 years before you take your first third step. Being willing to give up my will and my life to a God that I find in this program or a power, that's not easy for people like us. Part of my alcoholism is that I'm defiant. I didn't think it was a good idea until you told me not to do it. So now I'm doing it. It's part of my alcoholism is this defiance towards authority, against cops, which was also my dad. It didn't really work out. I used to get so mad. I'd come home from school and my dad would smash my bongs just when I walked in the door, purposefully to get under my skin. It never crossed my mind that I'm bringing drugs into a cop's house. It was he was doing that to jade me, make me even more bitter than I am, And so I ran away from home at 17 and I moved a block away into the drug dealer's house, who was my boyfriend. And we lived happily ever after. He cheated on me with every girl in town, and I stayed with him because he was going to change. And he didn't change, you guys. But I stayed with him. I was waiting, if I don't get my way, I'm going somewhere else, And so I started to... When I got sober this time, I started to see what my real problem was. I started to see and observe the selfishness in my head, and I started working with an old-timer sponsor who was just really effective at getting my alcoholism's attention. I remember calling my sponsor when I was newly sober and basically talking about all the grievances I had against everybody, how my boss isn't being my boss correctly, how, my parents are just shitty people, and I'm living at their house at almost 30 years old, thinking that my parents are the reason, that they're the problem, And so I remember complaining about all these people, and my sponsor said, I'm not a therapist. If you need a therapist, hop on Google, do some talk therapy, talk about your feelings. And that might sound harsh to some people. I needed to hear that. And my sponsor made it very clear that when you call me, we're taking the instructions and the solution in this book. And I had to unlearn sponsorship because I'd been in this program before. I had had several sponsors. I had done the steps with a lot of different people. And I had to set aside everything that I think I knew, and I had to unlearn what I had learned with my other sponsors. I wasn't checking in with my sponsor. I was taking the steps and these actions with somebody who has already been through it. And so I got in the habit of calling my sponsor and taking a solution, and I got 2 minutes to bitch on the phone, Sometimes if I was talking really fast, it was a little bit less, but, I had to unlearn some things, and my sponsor kept saying something on the phone, when you're ready. And I remember just calling, and finally one day I called and I said, what do you mean when you say when you're ready? And he said, when you're ready, we're going to take these steps and we're going to do this inventory. And he asked me a really important question. He asked me if I had any resentments to God. And there's a couple chapters in the big book that are really important before you get into the steps. And one of them is we agnostics. And in Bill's story, he talks about this prejudice he had to this thing called God. This guy named Abby Thatcher tried to invite Bill into finding Jesus Christ, and Bill had a prejudice, and he was resentful, and he didn't want to hear what Abby had to say. and he was resisting Ebby's message as a result of his prejudice. And my problem is that I've been living my life with a built-in narrator in my head that is full of judgment and opinions about everybody else. And the reason why I couldn't find God was because my God was buried underneath my secrets, my judgments, my opinions about everybody else. And I had this thing inside my head that was separating me from the power that could only be found within me. And that's what it says in We Agnostics. It says, in my last analysis, we found him in the only place that we hadn't looked, within myself. I had been looking tirelessly for the God out there that could only be found inside of here. I was looking in the wrong direction my entire life. My sponsor asked me, do you have a resentment to God? And I said, no, everyone believes in it. It must be real. And that was the prejudice, is okay, if we're getting honest here, if God was real and God's all loving and is the creator of this universe and is responsible for all the bullshit that I've gone through in my life, then why did I get molested as a child from my oldest cousin? Why am I getting cheated on in every single relationship? Why can't I stop drinking? If God's real, God's bullshit, because God's job is to save me from myself. And God's not doing God's job right. And I was mad. And so there was this inventory that I started to write out. And I remember on this particular day, I was going to meet with my sponsor, and it was very gray and gloomy outside. And, I was driving to a spot to meet with my sponsor, and I had my inventory ready, and the voice and the narrator inside my head's it's not a good day to do inventory. You're really depressed today. Why don't you just go home and, take a nap? And, this is bullshit, this AA stuff that people do. And, and this thing of surrender is, sometimes with the third step, it's, just saying okay whether you want to do it or not. And I went to this parking lot, and I pulled over, and I was doing this meeting with my sponsor. We're doing this inventory. We're going back and forth. I like to argue when I do inventory. It's how I learn. I got to make sure you're not going to I got to make sure you know your stuff when we're doing inventory. So I'm testing my sponsor. I'm just kidding. We're going through this resentment inventory, and I got mad on the phone. I started yelling, and my sponsor says one line out of the big book, and I can't explain it. My head cracked open. I started cussing out my sponsor. I was like, what the fuck? And I just kept repeating that over and over and over again. And my head cracked open, and what was a very depressing, horrible day turned into one of the most magnificent days that I've ever had in sobriety. I had a sudden and profound realization that led me to have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The only way I know how to describe it is that I saw a tree for the first time. And I know that sounds weird, but it's I'd been living my life, on Instagram, they have all those filters. Love them to death. Don't have to wear makeup now. And so there's I'm looking at life through a filter. And for whatever reason on this particular day, everything that I thought I knew about God got cracked open, and the filter got removed, and I was seeing life clearly for the first time. And I remember getting out of the car, walking around like I'd never been on earth before. And I was walking around, and I was at the Botanical Gardens in Hales Corner, Wisconsin. I didn't even know I was there. I just pulled over into a parking lot. And on the Botanical Gardens, they had this Chinese festival thing that they were setting up, and there was all these really big, I don't even know what they're called, things for the festival, and they were all super colorful. And I just remember the color was so bright, and the sky was so bright, and that moment has been with me through the ups and downs of my recovery. I can't explain it except for my perception shifted dramatically as a result of that inventory. And I finally met the power that people had been talking about in this program, and it wasn't the Santa Claus guy that I thought you guys were talking about. The Santa Claus in the sky, and he's going to judge you if you sin, all those things. I had a resentment. My grandmother, when I was 8 years old, told me that I was going to hell because I wasn't baptized. And like that scared the crap out of me at 8 years old. Like I was scared that if I was not in alignment with the way life was supposed to be living, like, and so I remember my mom got me this booklet and it had the Lord's Prayer. For the longest time, I could not say the Lord's Prayer at an AA meeting because I used that prayer every single night when I was really, really young, and I said it to God because I was afraid God was going to kill me if I didn't do it. And so I couldn't say it for a long time because I had a prejudice to that prayer. Shortly after that, I got to start writing my 8th step. I remember calling my sponsor. I'm like, all right, got this 8th step written for my mom. It's really thorough. Here's the things. I'm going to go make amends to her. And my sponsor and I went over this 8th step, and it was like, how are you going to make amends to your mom and tell her you're going to be financially responsible for your life when you're still living at your mama's house, And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And that's when the 6 and 7 work started. So 6 and 7 work for me was about becoming amended in this program. And I have a lot of experience with like being sober in these rooms, chairing home groups, sponsoring tons of women, and not being principled in my actions, meaning not being amended in my actions. And so I spent a lot of time, being sober in these rooms, and I'm still lying, I'm still stealing, I'm still cheating. I was embezzling money from a job that I loved. And I was like doing these really shady things as a sober person here, and then putting on this front. And I remember like going home just like sitting in my shower and like being completely depressed and suicidal and not really being able to shake what's about to happen. And like, for me, if you're self-reliant too long, it turns into a spiritual disease called resentment. And in the resentment inventory, it says like, we drink for one reason and one reason only, because of our resentments. And that's because when we are resentful, the insanity returns, and the only way to get relief from the insanity is to either drink my power, alcohol, or to find relief through these steps. That's literally the only way. And when I'm full, and like, to be honest with you guys, like I've struggled with like rage and anger and all the things, and like, when I get like really, really resentful, it's like, I am right, you are wrong, and I'm going to show you how wrong you are. And like, I remember, this is more of like a 10-step stuff, but like, I was closing up a lease recently. I'm smiling because some of you guys know about it, but I was closing up a lease. I like paid to have it all cleaned. I got it all ready for this guy, and he was dissatisfied with it. And I was like, dude, we spent like hours getting this place ready for this landlord. And I felt like this dude was like punishing me because I put a significant amount of effort into making sure that his house was in tip-top condition, and it wasn't up to his standards. And he was making some comments to me and getting under my skin. And so I was at the house in my freaking toolbox fixing some stuff that I didn't feel like was my responsibility. And I had a baseball bat in my truck, and I was like ready to take my baseball bat to this guy's house and like show this guy something he can really be mad about. And like this was like a month ago. And it's like, sometimes the best that I can do in this program is get in the truck and leave, and like that's the best I could do that day. Was like, I will cause some serious damage as a result of my resentments. And that's the spiritual disease that we talk about. So in the doctor's opinion, it says we have this 3-part condition. I have a spiritual malady, a mental obsession, and a phenomenon of craving. And in my experience, at some point, my will to stop drinking ceased to exist. And when I started, I would take one drink. It was always like, I'm just going to get drunk this weekend. I'm just going to do it on Friday. And like when I was I have a lot of experience, but I remember being 16 years old. I was a cheerleader, not very cheery, but I was a cheerleader. And after the game on Friday nights, the football games, we would go get drunk with a bunch of older people that weren't in high school anymore. And I would like wake up on streets and I had no idea where I was. And that was like my experience with alcohol from a young age. So the delusion that I could just drink on the weekend has never been true for me. Maybe when I was 14, but that ended very quickly. And And so like I'll have this delusional thought. It talks a lot about it in a chapter called More About Alcoholism. And the thought will tell me, I'm just going to get drunk tonight. I'm just going to get drunk this weekend. When I take a drink, that drink takes a drink, and then I'm a slave to the drink. That's the phenomenon of craving. It's once I put that first drink in my body, I am a slave to alcohol. So what once started as I'm getting drunk on the weekends is now Monday before work, Tuesday because my shoes are untied, Wednesday because it just feels good at this point, and then Thursday, Friday, and then years pass by and I'm wondering how I started drinking again. I've done some really shady stuff for alcohol. I remember I was staying at this guy's house. My boyfriend was in jail at the time. I was staying at his friend's house in the extra bedroom. I wasn't paying rent. I had no job. I was really just a useless human being. And I stole this guy's mom's credit card just so that I could walk down to the liquor store and buy like 1.75 liter of vodka. And at that point, and then I bought bus tickets with this guy's mom's credit card. And at that point, like I was drinking excessively, and I was drinking just to get out of bed in the morning. And I remember I got down to the bottom of this 1.75, and I couldn't get drunk anymore. And I remember crying at the kitchen table, sitting alone in this guy's house. Like I can't even, alcohol, it wasn't that alcohol was losing its effect. What I personally believe was happening was that my alcoholism was progressing beyond what the alcohol could do for me. And my real problem is the alcoholism. But in the doctor's opinion, it says we have a mental obsession. This is before I take a drink. All I can think about is the drink. And it's like my toddler. She goes, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy," all day long, you know? And it's like the voice in my head is like, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink, take a drink. Steal that stuff, you know? And it just goes on and on and on and on. And the only way to shut up my toddler is to give her what she wants. The only way to shut up the voice in my head is to give it what it wants. I either have to take a drink or I have to have a spiritual program that provides me with a power greater than the voice inside my head. Those are my only two options. And then the other part is the spiritual malady. It says in the doctor's opinion, it talks about how we have a dis-ease. I hyphenate the word dis-ease, and for me it's a body and a mind that are not at ease. And I drink for one reason and one reason only, and the book says it's because I like the effect produced by alcohol. And if you're like me, I have spent my entire life blaming my drinking on somebody else. And I spent years trying to figure out the root of why I drank. And like, to be honest with you, I was like, it's this dysfunctional family I grew up with in Detroit, you know? I was growing up in the ghetto. It was like, you know, all the guys that cheated on me, that's why I drink this way. It was my mom's anger problem. It was, you know, the fact that my cousin molested me at 8 years old and started raping me at 12. And like, I was convinced that there had to be a why to why I drank the way. But when I got really honest with myself, I drank because I liked the way alcohol makes me feel. And it's just that simple. And the reason why I know that today is because I got introduced to this fellowship and I started hearing your guys' stories. And when I heard your guys' story, and it's just this simple, like we drink, we have an effect produced by alcohol, we take these steps, we have an effect produced by the steps, and the solution for alcoholism works for somebody like me. And so if the solution works, that means I have to have alcoholism. And I started meeting people that had the same condition that I had, and they didn't grow up in a tortured home like I did. They didn't grow up with parents like I had. They grew up in really nice families, and they still drank the way that I drank. And like blaming it on something else, I couldn't blame it on anything else anymore. I had done years of EMDR therapy. I had been relieved for the most part of my traumatic experiences, and I still kept drinking, you know. Why does not get me to a solution. It only helps me manage my life more. Why, I learned, is a management question. You know, and then we agnostics, and it talks about this program is custom made for people that can't believe in God or don't believe in God. More about alcoholism, that's really my chapter. I have a progressive relationship with alcoholism. I still have it today. My alcoholism still seeks power in external things. And it's a big reason why I keep coming back to this program, is because I learned these, in the third step, it says we play these roles of God. And when I started to, me and my sponsor, define the characters in which I play God, and number one is the princess. She's the victim. Somebody needs to come save her. Self-pity, woe is me. And then there's the bitch, and she is, don't talk to me, I don't need your help, get away from me, I got it on my own. She's very self-reliant. And then there's the whore, and then the longer I've stayed sober, the more progressive these roles started to get. And so I started to discover there's like this little spiritual fairy, and then there's this drill sergeant, and then this mediator who thinks she needs to be in the midst of everybody's problems. And it's just like, there's so many roles in which my alcoholism plays God, and it progresses over a period of time. And so, I don't remember where I was going. Oh, more about alcoholism. It talks about our delusional thinking. The difference between delusion and dishonest is if I steal your wallet, I stick it in my back pocket, and I help you look for it, and I know it's in my back pocket, that's being dishonest. Now, if I steal your wallet and help you look for it, and it's in my back pocket, but I believe that it's not, that's delusion. Delusion is that this voice called self in my head, of my alcoholism, it's telling me lies. And when I believe those lies, I'm in delusion. And the only person that doesn't know she's delusional is me. No matter what a sponsor tells me, nobody can help you see through your delusion. My first step was not something that my sponsor gave me. My first step was between me and alcohol. My first step with the second half of the first step, the management of my life, was between me and the management of my life, which is called self-reliance. And until I was ready to surrender and wake up from that delusion, all the work a sponsor can do on me is ineffective until I hit that surrender button, And it's like, surrender what? It says, like, in the doctor's opinion, we have to have this psychic change, which means I have to have a personality change as a result of the 12 steps. That means that I'm not going to keep being me anymore. I have to be somebody else. And it's like when I got sober, it was like back at my parents' house, the head gasket blew out on my car, I lost my car, don't have a job, been fired from 25 jobs, whether I'm sober or not, because when I get sober, I have an ego problem. And so I lose everything, and it's like, what else do I have to surrender? What more could I possibly give up? And it's like you have to surrender your judgment. That's like the final thing. The judgment is what separates me from you. It's the only thing that separates me from you. It's the only thing that separates me from the power that's inside of me. And once I have a perception change, which happens in the 4th step, it says in the 4th step, it says we turn back to the list, for it held the key to our, I say freedom, the book says future. And for me, turning back to that list was when, that inventory became my amends. It's that 6 and 7 work, which is so vitally important when I practice being an amended person. And like for me, that didn't come easily. I did not wake up one day and I was like, wow, I'm surrendered. I'm completely honest now. It didn't happen for like that for me. I mean, maybe you guys are Mother Teresa. I'm not. But it's like, for me, I literally had to go to work and like practice being honest when I was at work. I had to, go about my life and practice honesty with people. And I remember those gut-wrenching pains in my stomach when I was like newly sober, being honest for the first time and being so uncomfortable in my own skin. And I get why people don't hang around in 12-step programs, because when you're required to change, it is uncomfortable to the spiritual sickness inside of you. And not everyone is ready to give that up. It's like when I started practicing being honest, not stealing from the grocery stores, like doing all the things that responsible people do, my alcoholism would start kicking and screaming. It's like, come back, where are you going? We're going to go rob a pharmacy today. Like, come on, And it's like that voice in my head just going on and on and on. It's a narrator. It's like when you're watching a football game, you got the sports analysis, right? And they're telling you what's happening in the game, but you're also watching the game. But my sports analysis is narrating life wrong. That's my judgment. And then, I remember my sponsor saying, am I offending your tender sensitivities? And I was like, yeah, dude, this work is hard, man. Like, I'm uncomfortable. And he said something really important to me. He goes, I'm not offending you. I'm offending your alcoholism. And I remember my head splitting into two, and I was like, I'm not the voice inside my head. And then I remember like walking around like I was a crazy person. I was like, the mind is an illusion. It's like, I was like going to meetings and I was saying some really off the wall. I mean, I'm kind of always off the wall, but I was really off the wall at this time. And I was just saying some really weird stuff. But I remember like becoming the observer of the voice inside of my head and realizing that the thoughts that go through my mind, they're not mine. And I was like, and it's like this, old programming that I have to give up. Now, I still have alcoholism. I used to get really bad brainstorms, so I don't know does anyone like go home at night and your head just goes crazy? Anybody? No? Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. And it's like my obsessive thinking, and I'm fighting with somebody in my head, and I got to tell them how wrong they are, so they tell me how right I am, and I'm arguing with people that aren't in the room, and I'm thinking about giving a speech like Martin Luther King one day, and all the cool things I'm going to do with my life, and one day I'm going to take over the world. Maybe I'll be the first woman president of the United States of America, and it's like my brain would do these things where it was like doing somersaults, and I can't be a parent to my daughter because like the voice inside my head is getting so freaking loud. And like that started with a lot of practice in this program. It started to become like a background noise almost. It said the book describes it as like the brainstorm or the grouch, and like I'm definitely a brainstorm person. So where was I? Oh, more about alcoholism. It progresses the longer you're sober. Sorry, you guys, but stick around and there's always a solution, and I love the chapter, there's a solution. The solution's not in that chapter, but keep coming back, and maybe you'll get it. And so what happened is like, the thing that was radically different in this sobriety was when I wrote out that 8-step and I actually started making amends as an amended person, because I had made direct amends to people before and I was not amended. I would tell you I was sorry for stealing from you while I was still stealing stuff. And like there's something really freeing about going to someone and you have a significant amount of practice doing your amends before you actually make the amends. And that's the 6 and 7 work. It's like, these character defects, it takes a lot of practice, and in my opinion, to outgrow certain defects of character. I remember being really embarrassed when I got in here. I remember not wanting to be here. I remember getting red in my seat with discomfort. I remember shaking profusely when I read something at the podium. I also remember women in sobriety being full of life, and they'd be so excited that a newcomer was in the meeting, and that was me at the time. And they'd be like all jolly, jumping around, coming up to me, introducing me, and I'm like, get away from me, I was like, it's just like, I wanted to like electrocute people. Like, why are you so happy? And now I'm happy all the time, and I do that to other people. So that's really cool. But the 9-step work is like, it says we have a long period of reconstruction ahead. And it seems like the longer I stay sober, the bigger that 9-step gets. And like something my sponsor had said was like, have an 8-step so big that only God can bring you through it. And my resentments became the key to my future, because when I saw my resentments in a new perspective, all it did was add value to my amends. And like the actual program that we have is outlined in a chapter called Into Action. That doesn't start until the 5th step. It's like when we have that trust with another human being. And I don't know if you guys are like me. I didn't trust anybody when I got in here. And I wasn't telling you guys anything. But when we have that trust where we can actually tell people the dark past that we have, and know that there's a solution out of the way that we were living, and there's this design for living that's available to us, it was like, that trust is like really, That's where the program starts. And then there's the 6 and 7 work, there's the 9-step work, the being amended. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I had to go to work and practice being employable. If I didn't feel like going to work, I wasn't going to work, and I was calling out sick. And I did that often, and I got fired from a lot of jobs. My best friend had to fire me from a job because I decided to take a trip and didn't feel like coming back, you know? And I did that stuff sober, you guys. And like, I share that because like, it took a lot. It took a reliance upon a power greater than the voice inside my head for me to become employable at jobs. And it took a lot of effort. And like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I've been in my terrible twos, you know, in my sobriety. And like sometimes like I feel like a little toddler. It's like, I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to do all this grown-up stuff. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to pay these bills and like blah, 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 blah. And something that I realized is this program is really about growing up. You know, it's about becoming mature in all areas of our life. And for me, the maturity for the 2 big ones for me was becoming mature in relationships. The 2 things that I use to manage my condition are always finance and romance. I either obsess about a guy or I obsess about getting more money. And I've always used that as a power in this program. And for whatever reason, like, I'm not going to say it stopped working because I don't believe that's true. But I had to find something bigger than those 2 powers. And that's what I found in this program. And I have a daily practice with meditation today where I really get to like rely upon that power. And, you know, it's so funny, like the big book, I used to want to rewrite it because it was like so old. I thought that it needed to be better until I actually started practicing the big book and seeing the power of the actions, the power in taking the actions and the instructions in that book. And now I think it's like such a masterpiece. But it says in the 3rd step, it says, we will have a new employer. And then later on in the book, it says in a chapter called Working with Others, and it says, now you have a new job. And it's like, oh, great. I come to AA and I have a new boss and a new job. And I guess what that is. And it's literally after every prayer in the book, it says, just so that you can be of maximum service to other people. And I used to try to pray to God and ask God what God's plan was for me so that I could get a big bank account, a really wonderful career, and all these cool things. And really what I realized that God really wants for me is just to help take care of his brothers and sisters, you know? And that's all of you guys. It's when I use my story to help someone out of the hell that they're in. And I remember writing my story when I was newly sober. And this is kind of like a little side note, but it was like I was writing my story, and it's just my story. I was writing it alone. 5 minutes a day, non-negotiable, with the voice inside my head. And I lied to a piece of paper. I was like writing down stuff that wasn't true, you know? I remember I was a couple months sober. I called my sponsor. I was like, I lied to a piece of paper. My sponsor laughed, because that's what my sponsor does to me. And I remember my sponsor sharing with me, like, why he asked me, why would I have you write your story? And I was like, so I can better understand my problems. And, so I can better understand me more. So I can obsess about me more. No, that's not why. It's because my sponsor said, the reason why you write your story is because one day there's going to be a girl, she doesn't know that she's going to get sober tomorrow. And she's going to be walking through the hell of abstinence, because abstinence for me is like doing prison time. And she's not going to need my story, and she's not going to need so-and-so's story, but she's going to need your story. And my story has been the only thing that's been useful to other people. And I used to think like, I was like so embarrassed of all the things that I'd done, because I've done some pretty messed up things, and I have a pretty perverted head and like all the things, but it's like that alcoholism that I've been living life in for all those years was the only ticket for some women out of the hell that they were experiencing. And I didn't realize that my life was really not to be lived for me, by me. It was to be lived by a power through me for you guys, and I'd been living my life for me my entire life. This program really taught me how to become other-centered, and I gotta be honest, like I have not arrived yet, like I still get judgments, I still get resentments, I still have secrets, I still do regular 5th steps and things like that. But I wouldn't trade this for anything that I've ever gone through, and it's been it's starting to even out. Like I'm getting really balanced and like even keel, and like my life's getting boring, which is really cool. The chaos of my life is kind of evening out. But it took a lot of freaking work in this program. And like, I remember like hitting my knees some nights, like being like devastated, like, I don't know if I can keep doing this AA crap that you guys are doing. And it's been so freaking worth it, because when you experience the freedom from the bondage of self, and you start getting like the gifts of the power, and that sanity returns. Because for me, the program is not about being sober. It's about the second step, which is being restored to sanity. You know, I'd been diagnosed with every mental illness in the book. They were like, this is why you keep drinking. And then I would take the pills, and I would find that alcohol was a better medication than the pills, you know. And I was never relieved of mental illness. But then I went through these steps, and I have not had to take psychiatric meds in the 3 years that I've been sober, you know. And that's wild to me, because I thought there was something seriously wrong with me. The steps restored me to sanity. And I've gotten to meet some really cool people in this program. I've had a lot of fun. I didn't know how badly I needed you guys. And I've gotten to do some really cool things. Like we were just talking on the phone earlier. On my 1 year of sobriety, it was during the pandemic, and I was doing admissions for a sober living house, and they were cutting all the planes. People were getting on planes and they weren't flying, you know. So we decided to drive a bunch of newly sober people across the country, and I was like getting all these people on the phone, and I was gonna drive them all across the country to this sober living house. And we only got one guy. He detoxed in a hotel room in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I found another person in AA, and we put him in the car, and we drove across the country with him. And like, that dude's still sober today, you know? And I don't believe it's by me. I believe it's the power that flows through us, because we're the conduit if we are relieved of our judgment, which separates us, you know? And it's like, I don't know, the 12 steps, alcohol did for me quickly what the 12 steps did for me slowly. But the 12 steps did for me permanently what alcohol only does for me temporarily, you know? And like, although it's been a lot of work, it's been really incredible, and I just want to say thank you, because I have had to do absolutely nothing in this program by myself. I've done this program with other people, and I've never had to be alone and afraid since I've joined this fellowship. So thank you so much for letting me share.